Good morning. So this is just a brief overview of the elements of a plot. This will allow you to complete the actual Google form based on the Pixar shorts. So the first part of a Google plot, or not a Google plot, sorry, of a plot diagram is the exposition or the introduction. This is where our characters are introduced. We get a little background of what the story is going to be like, and this is where we learn where and when the story takes place. The next part is this is pretty much the beginning part of the rising action. It's called the inciting incident. So this is where we learn what the main conflict of the story is. I mentioned this last week. I'm going to mention it again. Without a conflict, there is no story. Pretty much, we will learn what our protagonist is like, or more, at least more about our protagonist, based on how they handle this conflict. Just a quick review on conflict: a man versus man is a main character versus another human character. Man versus Society is pretty much our protagonist is going up against not just a whole bunch of people, but their laws, their beliefs, their values, or even their ideas. Person versus nature is one of these three examples: either an animal, weather, or an environment. So if you're up against a bear, or you're up against a storm, or you're up against maybe a deserted island. Those are three examples of you versus nature. And finally, there's man versus self. This is an inner conflict. So it's not enough to just say, "Oh, Katniss versus herself." You need to actually describe what issue with herself she has. So it could be something as making a difficult decision or choice. It could be a fear that they have, or it could also even be a bad habit that they have. So this, like I said, the inciting incident pretty much kicks off the rising action. This is where the majority of the story takes place, and this revolves around our main character struggling with the conflict. This builds the excitement of the story until finally we reach the climax of the story. In the climax, we have a better idea of how the story is going to end because the protagonist will finally confront their problem, their conflict. So this is the last step they will take to solve their problems. Just because the climax is the third part in the middle part of a plot diagram, remember that doesn't necessarily mean that the climax will happen in the middle of the story. It could happen at the end of a story, and you could have a really short rising action or falling action and exposition. So these are some things to look at when you are trying to identify a climax. If you're on the edge of your seat and you're questioning whether or not they'll win or they'll make it or they'll survive, if you feel like the story is getting really intense or it's at its greatest intensity, this could also probably be a moment where we might get a cliffhanger and you might be left wondering what might happen next. And or this might be the peak of emotional response. This is where you are the most invested in the story. This leads to our falling action, which is pretty much we see how our main character's decision to confront the conflict is played out. We pretty much get the result of the conflict here. Everything will start to be tied up and all loose ends will be ended. And finally, our denouement or resolution is pretty much literally how the story ends. Usually, you are left with a strong impression, a finality, and even a lesson or two. So, this is where you will most likely identify what a story's theme is. It's literally how the story ends, and it will allow you to kind of be like, okay, well, I may have learned about something, us may have learned something. Oh, that video. So, just a quick review on theme. The theme is the message the author wants you to learn from a story. It is not a summary of the story or what the story is about. It's the lesson. It's what the author wants you to take away from it. So we brought up the story of the Big Bad Wolf. I think it was last week, or either it might have been Monday or Tuesday. What is the lesson of the Big Bad Wolf? One of those lessons could be don't lie or say things that are not truthful because they might come back to haunt you. So that is the ending of our time. I hope this video helps you, and please have a good day.